Please welcome Bret Hartman, VP and CTO of the Security Business Group at Cisco Systems.
This is really awesome. Not only do I have to follow General Alexander, but a diamond giveaway. So this is even more of a challenge, but I'm going to do something even more exciting. I'm going to give an actual kind of technical talk, a little bit of a geeky talk, in 8 minutes. So this should be amazing, but I know most of you are technologists in the audience, so you will follow along to this rapid discussion. And so what I'm really going to talk about is a particular challenge with respect to TLS-based encryption on the web and the difficulties that that's providing. So I think we all recognize in the world, this trend is shown in this graph is really quite clear. That is, today in the internet, well over 50% of the world's internet traffic is encrypted, and it's just going to be a very small number of years where essentially all the world's internet traffic is encrypted by default, the vast majority. Now this, needless to say, is very good for privacy, but it's not so good with respect to security. And there's sort of a fundamental collision course. It's not quite the apocalypse, but it's definitely a clear fundamental collision course in the industry. Encryption is important. It's important for privacy. It's really important for all of us as individuals to make sure our personal data is protected. But on the other hand, we have corporations all over the world, we have governments all over the world that need to be able to look at this traffic to be able to defend themselves. And what we see is that more and more malware, the vast majority of malware today, actually leverages encryption too. And so there's a fundamental question here is that if everything gets encrypted, how do we defend ourselves? How do we protect ourselves with respect to these sorts of attacks? Now the standard approach, and I told you it's a little technical, not very. The standard approach here is a TLS proxy. It's a man in the middle that sits, decrypts the traffic, some organization inspects it, makes sure nothing is evil in the traffic, and then perhaps re-encrypts it and sends it off. The issue here, though, is that TLS proxies are less and less effective in the world, and certainly as we look forward, their relevance is going to continue to diminish. First of all, they're really expensive and slow. But probably more important here is that as we move to the cloud and we think about all the cloud applications here, they don't actually permit TLS proxies to exist. So you have certificate pinning, you have other mechanisms, so you just cannot use those cloud applications if you put a proxy in place. And that trend is clearly going to continue to grow. So they're just not going to work in many of these cases. And then finally, and perhaps most important for this discussion, is the issues around privacy. That is, if you terminate the TLS connection, all your data is exposed, and that may violate laws, regulations. It might be, certainly not appropriate. So here's the basic question. The basic question is, can we actually detect malware in this traffic without having to decrypt it? It seems kind of impossible. It seems sort of like magic, but there's quite a bit of research that shows that this is in fact feasible. And that's why I'm going to dig into a little detail, because when we talk about this, people go like, yeah, right, that's, does this really work? Does it really work at scale? All right, so this discussion is really based on some research work that was produced by some Cisco technologists. So Blake Anderson, David McGrew, and this is the published paper, research paper from last year. You can easily find it online. And so what I'm going to do is give kind of a high-level overview of those research results and then how they apply to the practical world. And this is classic machine learning applied to this problem of how do you find malware in encrypted traffic. So it starts with taking known malware traffic and known benign traffic. And to make this work, you need a lot of it. You need millions and millions of data points to be able to make this work at scale. And what you do is extract observable features, and I'll talk about what those are because that's really important, to be able to look at characteristics of malware and benign traffic. And they use machine learning. And these are well-known techniques in terms of machine learning, and build detectors to be able to classify the two. And in fact, by using these techniques, it actually turns out that we can identify with a very, very high degree of accuracy malware without actually having to decrypt traffic. And this is actually a really big deal. In fact, as far as I know, it's never been done in the industry before. And so I think this actually enables our ability to protect ourselves far more than we ever have before as encryption continues to grow. So I'll dig into this a little bit just to give you intuitively what we're doing. So in this picture, what you see are two TLS sessions. One benign one, a Google search, and one bad one, a piece of malware. And what you can see kind of intuitively when you look at it is what the diagrams are showing are essentially patterns of the TLS flow, the encrypted traffic. And you can see they really, really look different in terms of what you do in a Google search and how malware behaves. So you can see it's not one single packet, it's all these packets over time. And essentially what we're doing is looking for these patterns and distinguishing them and using massive amounts of network metadata to do this. Now we start with NetFlow. This is kind of your classic IPs and ports, but we add a lot of other important kinds of metadata that haven't been used in the past. First we use timing data between the packets, sequence of packets, lengths, and times. Data about the TLS connection itself, certificates and extensions, DNS data, so domain name server data, and finally HTTP data. So we have these huge amounts of different kinds of metadata that by combining and analyzing, we can actually get incredible results. So this in the research paper actually shows how good they are. So if we just start with DNS data, domain name servers, and looking at, again, this is all entirely encrypted, but the DNS access is actually not encrypted, so we can actually see the DNS access. And what we see is you get pretty good results just with DNS. You can actually detect almost 95% of malware just with this simple technique, so that's not bad for now. If we add TLS metadata to this, we actually get better results. And an important thing to recognize here is it's not just being able to detect malware in this encrypted traffic, but because it's machine learning, you always have the danger of false positives, identifying something that's malware that isn't. And many, many machine learning techniques fall apart because of a very high false positive rate. And the fact is that in this analysis, we actually get what amounts to a 1 in 10,000 false discovery rate, which is actually very, very good and very, very practical. So not only do we get very accurate data, but we also get it at a very low false positive rate. Now, just to kind of build out this story, if we add all those other kinds of metadata that I talked about, HTTP and packet timing and stuff, you get some amazing statistics. So what we're seeing is, again, without decrypting traffic, we're seeing this detecting 99.978% of the malware with a very low false positive rate. This is actually really usable technology. This has actually been tested. It's not in a product yet, but actually it will be this year. But this research has actually been running within the massive Cisco network across millions and millions of flows. So we're pretty confident at this point that the research work is actually going to be relevant in the real world. So just to summarize, as we think about the way forward and we think about this, it's clearly a real problem. As more and more traffic is encrypted, we have to have a way forward, and we can't do it just based on decrypting the traffic. And so really the trick here is to be able to analyze the encrypted data and do that while still preserving privacy. So thanks very much, and enjoy the rest of the show. Thanks.